Hello, my name's Jane Winters and I'm Professor of Digital Humanities at the School of Advanced Study, University of London. I'm very grateful to Sharon and Michael for the opportunity to talk to you today about web archives as sites of collaboration. So what is the value of collaboration when we're working with web archives? For me, the fundamental fact is that the challenges posed by the archiving and preservation of born digital data, including web archives, are too great to be solved by individual organisations. Researchers need web archivists, and web archivists need researchers, and we also need the much wider landscape of the general public, funders, and other stakeholders with an interest in the preservation and analysis of our digital cultural heritage. The web is archived in many different places and by many different people, and it's only by working together that we can make the most of that knowledge, the skills and the content that are being developed around the world. And finally, working with the archived web involves a wide range of skills, and these can be difficult, if not impossible, to find in one person or organisation. Together we can be more than the sum of our parts. So what does collaboration look like when we're talking about web archiving and web archive studies? There are numerous examples in a notably collaborative field of activity, so I can only talk about a few of them today. But I think one of the most important is RESOR, the research infrastructure for the study of archived web materials. This international network for web archivists and researchers was first convened by Niels Brugger in 2012. It has generated numerous research projects and initiatives, and I'm sure some of you will have been involved with them, including most recently WARCnet, which I will talk about in a moment. It also enabled the establishment of a biennial Web Archives conference. The inaugural event was held at Aarhus in 2015, and then subsequently in London, Amsterdam, and we hope face-to-face in Luxembourg next year. This has been a vital forum for people to come together to share knowledge and expertise, build their networks, and open up the field to new entrants. And there's a very strong culture of involving early career researchers and helping them to engage with what can seem like a particularly daunting area of research. I mentioned WARCnet, and this is a relatively recent research network, again convened by Niels Brugger with Valerie Schaffer and me as co-investigators. And I think the way in which this network has been structured indicates the benefits of sectoral expertise, but also collaboration across that sectoral expertise. So the network is divided into 4 working groups, the first of which compares entire web domains. The second analyses transnational events, and that's very strong on the academic research side of things. The third looks at digital research methods and tools, and the fourth looks at research data management across borders, which is really where the web archives are leading the way in research. And the findings of each of these working groups feed into each other and build in an iterative process so that our knowledge across all parties grows together. And I think the diagram that Niels has developed there is very simple, but shows this relationship and how the collaboration works. Just as an aside, this screenshot of course is an interesting web archive artifact in its own right, with the coronavirus information to students and staff notice at the top of the page. Collaboration can also take place within individual research projects, as in this example, Big UK Domain Data for the Arts and Humanities, or BUDA. The project which I was involved with was funded by the UK Arts and Humanities Research Council in 2014, so a couple of years after Niels started RESOR. It was a cross-sectoral, inter-institutional and international collaboration. As you can see here, it involved the British Library, the School of Advanced Study where I'm based, the Oxford Internet Institute and Aarhus University. And it brought together a particular mix of skills. There were historians, archivists, data scientists, digital humanists, technical developers, social scientists. The list probably goes on. But that mix of skills was absolutely essential, and we couldn't have achieved what we did without it. The engagement of early career researchers was again important here, and we involved a cohort of 10 from a wide range of disciplines who devised their own pilot projects and worked with a central team to see how useful web archives could be for them to investigate those projects. And participatory design, a fantastic form of collaboration, was at the heart of the project. The team worked together to help to build an interface to the dataset of web archives for 1996 to 2013, for the .uk domain, that is. And here it is. Some of you may already be familiar with Shine, which is still going as a prototype historical search engine more than 5 years later. And the work that was done for this project has helped feed in to the more recent redesign of the interface for access to the UK Web Archive at the British Library. A different kind of collaboration again is exemplified by the Cleopatra project. Cleopatra stands for Cross-Lingual, Event-Centric, Open Analytics Research Academy. And as you can probably tell from the title, it's concerned with how major events play out online across different national domains and in multiple different languages. Starting in 2018, Cleopatra is a Marie Curie innovative training network involving partners in the UK, Germany, Slovenia, the Netherlands, Hungary and Portugal. There are 15 PhD studentships attached to the project and an international programme of training which is designed to enhance the skills base for early career researchers who want to work with web archives. The configuration of the disciplines looks a little bit different from the Buddha project. It's predominantly computer science, but also includes digital humanities and media studies. Web archiving institutions are also involved in the collaboration, and there are student placements at the National Archives of the UK, the British Library and the Portuguese Web Archive. The value of the collaboration can be seen in this blog post written by Caio Mello, a PhD student at the School of Advanced Study in the University of London. Caio, who is also presenting at this conference, spent some time working with the UK Web Archive team at the British Library, exploring the data that they held. His particular focus is on Olympic legacy, and he wrote 2 blog posts, among them this one, rather controversially titled, Boris Johnson, Fertility and the Royal Baby. How far does the concept of Olympic legacy go? Another kind of collaboration which also involves computer scientists is the Archives Unleashed project, led by, among others, Jimmy Lin, Ian Milligan and Nick Rouet. Now in its second phase of funding from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, Archives Unleashed was inspired by a series of datathons held at the University of Toronto, the Library of Congress, the Internet Archive and the British Library. And again, you can see universities and web archives in different countries collaborating around web archiving and web archiving studies. The project team includes historians, archivists, librarians and computer and data scientists, and it has an explicitly open ethos, developing notebooks, a toolkit and cloud services which are aimed at making it easier for researchers to work with web archives. We all know that this is a challenging field for new entrants, as I've mentioned already, and Archives Unleashed is doing vital work in opening up the field. And I noticed on their website that there are plans for an Archives Unleashed cohorts programme to support even greater researcher engagement, and I very much look forward to seeing what they'll achieve. This is the Archives Unleashed cloud with a visualisation of some of the links between sites in the dataset. Very similar to Archives Unleashed, but much more focused as a research project, was the work done at the Alan Turing Institute Data Study Group in 2019. This was an intensive 5-day hackathon designed to address particular data challenges. And in December of last year, one of those challenges, sponsored by the National Archives of the UK, was discovering topics and trends in the UK Government Web Archive. The call for participants identified a set of useful skills, which included natural language processing, language modelling, computational linguistics, machine learning, data science, and digital humanities. This is yet another example of the interdisciplinarity that's essential for collaboration around web archives. And it also brought in business participants, getting a different kind of stakeholder involvement. But archival expertise underpinned the entire exercise. It was the curators at the National Archives who helped to shape the questions and guided the researchers and gave them context for the data that they were working with. This was from an earlier hackathon held by the National Archives, but it demonstrates the kind of work that comes out of activity like that. And it's a visualisation of topics in the UK Government Web Archive, including food production, innovation, the Science Museum Group, heritage, and so on. And this is offering different routes into the data and showing unexpected strengths and clusters of information in what you might view as a set of information for the administration of the UK rather than for more cultural activity. And there are so many other kinds of collaboration, different modes of doing it, different organisations, different setups. The most important on the archival side of things, I think, is the long-standing International Internet Preservation Consortium. And the value of that collaboration can be seen in this year of all years in the collaborative collection programme around COVID-19 and the pandemic. This is the form for people to contribute websites that they feel should be included in this collection. The fruits of that IIPC collaborative collecting process are already visible in this special collection for the novel coronavirus COVID-19, which is hosted on the Internet Archive's Archive It platform. It began in February 2020, and at the time I was putting this presentation together, there were already 8,984 separate items included in the collection. And in a huge variety of languages. We can see at the top here just English, Portuguese, Spanish, French and German, but there are many more and categorised by various different types: media article, government agencies, non-profit, media and so on. This kind of comprehensive global collection couldn't possibly be produced by individual web archives, many of whom have a mandate only to collect nationally. But bringing that expertise and content knowledge together in one place allows this tremendous collaborative exercise, which will produce a historical record of vital importance for the future, and potentially a record of use for current policy as well. This is far from the only example of collaborative collections of this kind, but it's certainly one of the most immediately important and a very easy way to demonstrate both the value of web archives and the value of collaboration. But collaboration can take other forms too, and this may be tacit collaboration that's happening behind the scenes without necessarily having formal partnerships or formal funding streams. These are the GitHub repositories of the UK Web Archive at the British Library, which make code and data available for anybody else who wants to use them. They can't possibly know all of the people who benefit from this sharing of data, but it's a very important and relatively lightweight method of collaboration which benefits everybody. And of course, a conference like this one, Engaging with Web Archives, has collaboration at its heart, and the fantastic work that Sharon and Michael have done in bringing together people from all different career stages, different disciplinary backgrounds, different archives, different universities, to come together and share and be open and collaborate and find opportunities, challenges and potential. Those are just some of the different forms of collaboration that are possible around web archiving and web archive studies. No doubt you know more and could add to that list and come up with different ways of working, different kinds of collaboration, different groups of people to collaborate with. But I want to conclude by just thinking about what collaboration fundamentally requires to be in place in order to be successful and to achieve something and advance the field. I think the concept of radical openness is a very useful one to have in mind, and that's not just about publishing the outputs of research or final data sets, but of being open at every stage of the research and archiving process, or more realistically, processes. Talking about the problems, what went wrong, what went right, what would you do differently, why did you choose to do it that way? How can what you've learnt help other people? And I think this community is particularly good about this sort of openness. It's not just concerned about open access publication, it's about so much more than that. Explaining, sharing, being open. And that contributes to the development of common understandings and expectations, which I think are absolutely essential for successful collaboration. I've talked about the different sectors, the different disciplines, the different kinds of people involved in some of those successful collaborations. And working towards a common language to enable that collaboration has always been important. And there's more to do, but we're getting a long way down that particular road. And expectations are significant. Researchers have particular requirements in their careers. They have to publish, they want access to data, but archivists have similar expectations and imperatives that reflect their own sectoral requirements, and we need to understand what those are if we're going to work together successfully. Access to data is also absolutely key, but it need not necessarily be at scale. Certain kinds of research require access to data at scale, and the derived data sets that are being published by a lot of archives help get some of the way down that road. But huge amounts of research can be done qualitatively with small data sets and access to particular subsets of that larger data at scale. Funding, of course, I don't have to tell you, helps with this collaboration. The archiving itself requires really serious resourcing, and networks are so much easier to maintain if you have research grant funding, and a lot of what I've talked about today has had research grant funding. But it's not quite as much as you might think. Small-scale, low-level, ongoing collaboration between groups of researchers or particular universities and archives, or between individual researchers and individual archivists, can get a long way down the road on goodwill, but they might go a little bit faster if they had funding. Collective advocacy is also important because the results of collaboration are not always immediately visible. In fact, they're not often immediately visible. It takes time. So all of us have to justify why we're spending time on these collaborations and working with people around web archives. Why is it important? Why should it be supported? What does it allow us to do? I hope that I've shown you some examples of precisely why it's important and the value of working in these ways. But we shouldn't take it for granted that everyone thinks collaboration around web archives is essential. Shouldn't you just get on an archive and researchers can come along later? I don't think that's the best way of doing it. An embracing of an experimental ethos, I think, is also really significant in a new and developing field like this, because things will fail. It's inevitable. That's at the heart of experimentation. You have to fail in order to succeed a lot of the time. So being ready to abandon things that haven't worked and to thinking differently about what the research practice is like. And that engagement between all parties to experiment and a certain playfulness sometimes around working with this data, I think can be enormously beneficial for collaboration. And there needs to be a commitment to breaking down barriers, and that's both at institutional and individual levels. It's not easy for me as a historian always to work with a computer or data scientist and vice versa. We have different understandings. That comes back to the common language idea. But it's worthwhile breaking down those barriers because the interesting discussions that happen in those spaces in between are so vitally important. And there are barriers between individual researchers and archiving institutions. If you don't have access directly to the archivists, how do you start? Who do you know who to get in touch with? Have they got the time to talk to you because they're working very hard and are not always properly resourced? And between individual institutions, the IIPC is a very important mechanism for helping different institutions to work together, but it's not always easy for that cross-collecting to happen where there are legal barriers in place. And that, of course, is the challenge. There are technical barriers, legal barriers, institutional barriers, and disciplinary barriers, and I'm sure I've missed out several other kinds of barrier that can get in the way. So we shouldn't get obsessed about barriers, but we need to recognise they're there and work to break them down. And that requires my final bullet point here, which is persistence. Collaboration is fantastic, but it isn't always easy. And the easiness of collaboration may vary from time to time or from place to place, and sometimes it really is only persistence and patience which can help us develop the collaborations and networks that are really going to be transformative for our field. That all sounds like a lot of work, right? So why should we do it? Well, I would argue that through collaboration we can find out what works, and perhaps even more importantly, what doesn't. Most of the core standards, methods and tools for web archiving have been developed through collaboration, consultation, partnership and sharing. It's also through collaboration that we can demonstrate the value of the archived web for research and for society in general, and will probably be increasingly called upon to do that. That in turn helps us to make the case for greater investment in web archiving and in web archiving institutions and people. That might mean more budgets for special collections, but it might also mean greater training programs for practitioners and researchers, and more opportunities for them to come together to work. We can also argue for enhanced access to web archives once we've demonstrated value and have greater investment. And that is significant for researchers, for the general public, for anyone who wants to have access to our digital cultural heritage. We can work together to try and reduce some of the restrictions that are in place at the moment, some for very good reasons, others less so. And finally, we can continue to develop a robust community of practice and knowledge. I think that's what we have, but it has to be invested in over the longer term, and that happens through collaboration. So thank you very much for listening, and here's to more collaboration, whatever form that might take and wherever it might happen. I look forward to answering your questions and hearing your ideas.